Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host, Mr. Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian, and today, episode 146, we are finishing our two-part two-part episodic arc on going back to school. Last week we had Sandy Santero, our IEP advocate. Today we have an attorney who specializes with special needs families and advocates for special needs families. So excited to have this conversation with Frank. You're going to love him. Really committed and dedicated. And so another episode of Just Two Dads coming your way. Welcome back, everybody. I am Brian Altunian, along with my co-host and partner in Thrive, my colleague, my business partner, Mr. Shawn Francis. Today, we are recording episode number 146. 3 years ago, Shawn and I decided to talk about the things that we do. We're both in the financial services business, and we were forming our initiative around special needs families, since we're both fathers of children who've been dealing with special needs issues. And we thought, we kept meeting some really fabulous people who are servicing the special needs community. And we thought, man, more people should know about these folks. And when our children were diagnosed, we didn't have access to a lot of resources. In my case, I don't know, the internet I was still accessing everything on Prodigy, if you can imagine, and AOL. And so we decided to put together this podcast to shine a light on those folks who are doing some great things for the special needs community. Today's guest is no exception. Before we jump into it with our guest, we want a couple things. Shout out to people who are joining us on Facebook Live. Please leave comments, share with your friends and family. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel at Just Two Dads, you can again subscribe. Please share with your friends. This information is so valuable. While Frank is located in California, the stuff that he's going to be talking about is basically can be done on a nationwide level. So share with folks who are looking for some advocacy from an attorney. If you're hearing us on podcast outlets, welcome, and WSTX AM radio in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Shawn was born and still has family and some roots. Thanks for making us part of your listening day. And we're looking forward to today's conversations. Without further ado, let me just say this last thing. Sorry, Shawn, I've jumped in. If you want to send us a note to wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. That's all one word, wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. Let us know if you have any questions, thoughts, guests that you think we should be talking to, and anything about today's guest. And we will hook you up, connect you with today's guest, Frank. And I love the fact that my daughter Jordan is Joe Leah. You'll see Frank in the comments. Joe is one of our regular listeners and participants. So hi, Joe. All right, without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Shawn to introduce Frank and get into today's conversation. You're going to love it. Go ahead, bud.
Glad to be here. Thankful and grateful as always. Our guest, one of the great things about being a part of this community is you continue to meet wonderful people that are just advocates and warriors. And our guest today is no exception. As a matter of fact, I was at an event for the Special Needs Network. They are a friend of the show, as is their founder, Ariva Martin. They had a back to school event, fantastic organization. And it was a windy day. I was getting my booth set up, my table and everything. And Frank was sitting across from me, looked over kind of once or twice, and must have really felt for me, because as I was putting the tablecloth on the table, the wind was getting the better of me, and he just came over and goes, "Would you like some help?" And from that moment, it wasn't what he said, but how he said it made me think, you know what, I need to get to know him. And I saw the way he acted with people and interacted and carried himself. One of the things you can do for yourself as a favor as you get older in this life is make sure that your consciousness, your antenna, so to speak, is up. You can never know too many good people. And when you see them in your presence, make sure that you acknowledge them and you make them a part of the circle and add value to their time, because that's exactly what this man is going to do here today. He is an attorney who fights for educational rights for those with special needs. Please welcome to Just Two Dads, Frank Zankich. Frank, welcome.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
to have you, Frank. By the way, Shawn, I just want to say one thing. I think it's a good thing, right? Because people like Frank who acknowledge and extend a hand, that's too rare, right? That should not be the exception to the rule. That should be the rule, right?
Yes.
So thank you, Frank, for being just a model, a model partner in this life, in this human life that we're in. I appreciate you extending that time, and we need more people like you. So just wanted to comment, and I think we should all be looking for opportunities to do that for other folks, and look for folks who extend their hands, because it makes such a difference in the world. So,
and Frank, you probably don't see yourself as a hero. But
no, I mean, I am. I do get paid for this. I'm not a saint, but
here's the thing: most heroes don't walk around saying, "I'm a hero," right? So, and most heroes have powers, and our superpowers come from. I just said ours, though. I'm saying I'm a hero. Wow. most heroes have superpowers, but here's you know what? I believe all human beings have the capability to be heroes. And everyone has superpowers of some kind. Some of us just haven't discovered them yet. But those who are doing work of service and are living out the actions in the words of Muhammad Ali, which is that service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on earth, those powers come from an origin. And so tell us a bit about yourself, where you come from, your upbringing, and what got you into the special needs community. Because some of us are members of this community by circumstance, by the birth of our child. Some of us are here because we completely choose to be. Tell us about your path and how you got where you are today.
Born and raised in Southern California. Grew up in San Pedro, and my father was an attorney, and I felt it best that I go into the same profession. Started off, I've been practicing law for like 37 years. Started off in the construction industry and met a lot of different people, and as you go on with your profession, you got the young guy in the firm. He came along, and I was mentoring him, and then the construction industry just fell, and this young buck that I was mentoring, his name is Keith Davis, also an attorney. He saw me floundering in the construction industry because all my clients are going bankrupt. And he was doing special ed law at that time. And he offered to mentor me. And so that's how I got into the...
How long ago was that?
That was like about over 10 years ago. And he actually practices in the inner city and got a lot of experience. He's connected with the regional center. And
I think I know of him. Yeah.
Yes. He's a great guy. And he's, a competitor of mine. But he doesn't look at it that way. He just looks at it like, we need more people in the industry, and come aboard, and here, I'll teach you what I can, and then you can go on your own.
I love that. I learned something early on when I was doing consulting for businesses and business owners. There's no such thing as competition. Even if you're competing for the same client, the reality is we're all colleagues. And I always say, look, you can look at your competition as somebody who, if you've got a client that you don't mesh with particularly, that's somebody you refer to what I would say is your competition, and vice versa. You actually end up sharing more resources than you do competing. I realize in a tight field, you may be competing over a smaller number of clients, but really, I love that your perspective on. You mentored him, he mentored you, and I would say you guys are probably more colleagues than competition. Yeah,
true.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
And you should have an abundance mindset. Anyway, there's more. How many billion people are there on the earth? And sure. What's meant for you is meant for you. Uh-huh. So then, tell us, Frank, talking about that transition, then. Let me back up just a little. So, are you married? Do you have any kids?
Oh, married, 2 kids. They're both have graduated. They have their jobs, living their own lives.
Neurotypical, not special needs issues.
Yes.
Love that.
So then tell me that.
Yeah, go ahead, Shawn.
Yeah,
I know you're going to ask this question.
Yeah. I was just going to say. So again, when someone chooses our community and you're not a member of that community, you decide to go walk into it. Like I said, because of your nature and everything, we'd be lying to say that you didn't recognize, okay, I'm practicing this area of law. It's less than stable. It's not profitable. I got to eat. So let me go in this direction. But I also don't think that it's as plain and simple as that, because you don't strike me as such. So, tell us about that transition, taking that step, and then what the first case was like.
Yeah. What was it about? You could have gone into any area of law after leaving the construction business. You could have gone into real estate. That seemed a natural transition, or entertainment. We're in Southern California. What was it about what Keith was doing? What was it about the special needs community that had you decide this is the area that I want to go into? I think that's fascinating.
Well, I mean, definitely it's nice to have that. It's more fulfilling, basically, bottom line. It's like you're just in it for the buck. At a certain point, it just gets tiring. It's like, what am I doing here? It's like just fighting over money. It's a completely different method of practicing law also. There's no timesheet. I'm fortunate enough that I can not bill the parents anything and get paid from the school district through the mediation settlement process. And it's very freeing in that way. And then also just the satisfaction afterwards that, you got the kid something better than they had before. You're not in it to just get all the special needs parents I have. They're not greedy. They're not just trying to get stuff. They're just wanting a better life for their child. So
they just want accommodations and services and make sure that they've got whatever they can to make their children successful, right?
Exactly.
That's so interesting. I never thought of that, because it's one thing to consider for your own peace of mind, being in an environment where either the nature of the environment causes you to be money hungry, or if you're working for someone and you don't have your own firm or your own business, you have to be money hungry for them. And that's one thing people think about, but I've never stopped to think about the atmosphere where your clients are either money hungry or driven by something less than purpose as well. Because as you're saying that, I tend to be very visual. I literally imagine you sitting in a boardroom fighting over, helping someone with their fight over some money that they're not going to necessarily starve if they don't get, and just quote unquote petty things, and being in the room physically, but being someplace else mentally, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Versus being in an atmosphere where you're engaged in the fight, and the mental artillery, the cape, whatever have you, is on, because it's like, I need to make sure that this person's needs are met. There's something to be said for that, for anybody that's listening. At the end of the day, ask yourself, how fulfilled do you feel by the work you do? Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just saying. So, but just Frank, just so people understand, and without giving any specific details, and I've had experience with a special needs attorney very specifically for some stuff that happened with Jordan. But share with us some of the kinds of cases and some of the kinds of things that you're doing and that you're advocating for parents, so that people understand where does it, because it's different than an IEP advocate, right? An IEP advocate can go and sit in an IEP. You could do that too, but it would actually cost people money to do that. You're not sitting in an IEP per se. But share with us the kinds of cases that you take on that you do, so people get a good understanding, because you're going to get paid by the regional center or the school district or whatever. And as to finish Shawn's vision of what it is that you're doing, share with us some things that you're doing.
Sure. Just to go back to what Shawn was talking about, fighting for stuff. You're in a settlement meeting in construction law, and you're actually practically hands to, just taking them on. It's almost physical. You're yelling at each other. And spit's coming out. It's like, it's very aggressive. When you go to a settlement meeting for special needs, it's much more of a kumbaya type of situation. There's a lot of let's sit down and figure out what this kid needs and let's work it out. It's not as aggressive. The opposing counsels that I deal with are good people. The special ed directors, once you get to that level, they they tend to, especially for LAUSD, they tend to open their book. You get to see what services are actually available. They'll offer things that you didn't even ask for, recognizing the needs. It's just more, let's all get together and work this out type of situation.
Do you ever have an instance where you need to be a bulldog for your client because the district is being less than cooperative? Oh, any district. This isn't to point out LAUSD, but
right, definitely. That does come up, and we have to go to trial once in a while. But it's much less than you would think. I would say maybe 5% of the cases. The rest of them is more, let's just work this out. Let's get this done.
Let me ask you a question. We've had throughout. My son is 17. He's in his last year of high school. Gosh, that's just
yeah.
Anyway, and we've been looking, going down the conservatorship road and all that kind of stuff. So I'll be sharing that experience because I've learned a lot, as much as I thought I knew as an advocate and working in financial services and everything prior. But I've always been of the mind, the district that our son is in, it happens to be in the Burbank district, and we've had predominantly just great experience with supportive staff, teachers, anything that had to be that we've needed. They've been reasonable about it in terms of conversation and everything. And prior to him and our other kids beginning school in that district, I thought right away that, with few exceptions, you get in return that which you put out. So in other words, if I approach the district, as a bulldog outwardly, so like, all right, I pity the fool that won't give my child the rights that he deserves. If I walk in there with that mentality, I'm going to get, well, I'm the fool that you're going to pity. And right away, there's static, right? There's some exception to that, and I think if I walk in prepared to do that, if it's necessary, but it's in my back pocket, it's going to be a more amicable environment. But I know some parents in support groups that I belong to, and some that are friends, and in some cases in the very same district, that have put on gloves and in some cases been ready to take them off and swing. What is your thought on my belief there, that you kind of get what you give? Is that my naivete? Am I being Pollyanna? What would you say about that?
No, I agree. In fact, quite often when a parent comes to me and it's a smaller issue, I'll help them with the tools to know what to ask for. You have to, and different things like vernacular. You need to know what those initials all stand for and different things. And I'll help them and I'll say, if I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your group, with the school district, but if you have a good relationship, why don't I stay on the sidelines? Why don't I just give you what to ask for? And if that doesn't work, then we can start doing something where I write a letter on my letterhead or something. But a lot of the school districts, they start clamming up when they see an attorney involved. And so I completely agree with you. If you can go in with a nice attitude, you can get a lot more done typically.
That's great. That confirms my other thought. Sorry, Brian. I'm just going to say one thing, which is, with our work in financial services, the way the industry works is it generally goes after and supposedly, quote unquote, helps wealthy people. Doesn't necessarily service people and leaves everybody else behind. And in some cases, wealthy people get left behind. The way that we work is very holistic. And the way that we approach that has affected, between that and my experience with school districts, has made me think, in life, you need a team. So you should have a financial person, your doctor, a therapist, if need be, someone that helps you, physically, whatever the case is. Would you say the same thing is wise when it comes to the district? In other words, as opposed to you being adversarial, though you want to be prepared in case that takes place, look at it as a thing. This is your child's team. I'm the coach of my child's team, or the franchise owner. I'm looking to pick the people within the district, including the teacher, the aide, whoever, the therapist. We're a team. Would you say that that's a wise approach to take?
Oh yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, there's some people out there that they take advantage of the special needs area, and there's some experts that charge a lot of money. And it's difficult to find that right team. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but worthy. Yeah. Go
For
ahead, Brian,
sure.
sorry.
So I just want to, again, go back to what are the kinds of things, because we know what it takes to have an IEP, when you're asking for accommodations and services. So where do you interact? What are the kinds of things that you deal with? So just so parents have an idea.
A lot of my cases, I get referrals from the Department of Mental Health and Child Protective Services for kids that are emotionally disturbed. And so a lot of times these poor kids don't have the right medications to help them with those problems, and they have a lot of behavior issues. A lot of these kids need to go to what's called the most restrictive environment, and their placement needs to be a residential home for a little bit of time at least. And they go there and they're able to get their medications. They're there for 24 hours. It's a boarding school, and they get their medications taken care of. They get to work on their coping skills on what to do when they're having a behavior issue, a tantrum or whatever. And then the school district has to pay for that. It's a strange thing we've done is we've pretty much closed all our mental facilities, and the school districts from 3 to 22 have the responsibility to take care of our mentally ill children. And so they have to pay a lot of money. It's like over $10,000 a month to house and take care of these kids. But they get funding for that, and that's available. And it's a hard one to sell to the school district. They try everything out. Other than that, it's a hard one to sell to the parents. The parents get free travel and stipends to eat and so much. They get to go for like 2 times a year to see their kids, and most of the places are out of state. And it's tough for the parents. It's tough for the kids, but it can be a relief for the families also, because if you have a kid that's got extreme behaviors, the whole family dynamics are all messed up. And so, it's tough.
So I want to address that, say 2 different things. First of all, what sounds like the services, you get engaged when something is required for our children that they're entitled to receive by the school district. Generally, the school district has to pay for it, and they like to fight those kinds of things. So something that sort of falls outside what they would consider to be the normal scope of what their responsibilities are, they would hire an attorney such as yourself. We put your Zankich law up on the zankichlaw.com for those who are listening, ZANKICHLAW.com. That they would engage you to help them advocate for the district paying for those additional services or requirements. First of all, is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. Second of all, so this goes back to our particular case when Jordan was a freshman in high school. She had an IEP. She had some learning disabilities, and she had a couple of classes that were specially focused, and some were mainstream classes. She was out of her classroom, unsupervised, and met with a friend in the library who got very upset with something that Jordan had done. Grabbed her. She was working in the library at the time. Grabbed her, pulled her into a storage room in the library, and grabbed a knife and slashed my daughter. Yeah, to the bone. By the way, it was pretty severe. She has a pretty massive scar. In that particular case, and by the way, the minute we wanted to talk to the administration about I don't want to say their responsibility, but how we solve this issue. Why was Jordan unsupervised? Why was she out of class? Blah, blah, blah. They immediately clammed up, prohibited any of the teachers from communicating with us, and handed us pamphlets on self-mutilation and the dangers of what kids are doing. That not only were they preventing us from having engaged conversations so that we could solve this problem, but then they were intimating that. And by the way, the principal at the time said to us, well, Jordan, she's just a Badinsky. She's just butting into other people's business, as if she was they were victim blaming and shaming, and then putting it off as if it were something else. So in that particular case, we hired a special needs attorney to work with us. And not only did Jordan get a settlement, but we ended up putting her into a facility. Now, by the way, to your point, what you just said, sometimes we need to move the child for their, for mental health support. But in other cases, you may need to have a facility for their protection. We felt that, that at the time when she was young, she didn't have the ability to identify dangerous situations. And so in a big school that she was in an LAUSD school, there was almost 4,000 students. It would be difficult to navigate and determine what was safe and what was dangerous. And so the school district paid for that, to your point. So that would be a service that they ended up paying for her to be in a boarding school environment out of state. That was difficult for all of us, but for her protection. And in addition to that, Jordan was able to get a monetary settlement as well. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, right? That's exactly the kind of situation that you would be engaged for. Yes.
And then also for the girl with the knife, I would also represent her. She would be probably up for to be expelled from school. And they would have to do a manifestation hearing to see if what her actions were a manifestation of her disability. And then I would show up to something like that. And actually, I don't get paid for that, but I do that for free, just because if a kid's going to get expelled, I want to make sure that something's there for them to have a safety net. They have something.
Safety net.
Yeah. As much as
anger management for her, even some anger management support, right? That she literally couldn't decipher right from wrong in that case.
And she's just acting without thinking, and thinking of the consequences and everything. She needs to learn the coping skills to calm herself down. Definitely. And beautiful. So as much as I feel for your daughter, I also feel for the other girl too.
We feel the same way, by the way. It was a horrible circumstance. Mm-hmm. Absolutely horrible circumstance.
You know what's interesting though? And this is why, we say this, I say this so much, Brian. I'm always talking about your consciousness. Raise your consciousness. Think about what you think about. I know the story because Brian and I are friends and we've been doing this show. And the one detail I didn't necessarily know is I didn't know that the school was out of state. But until you mentioned the other girl, Frank, and Brian, you know me, I'm very, questions are more powerful than statements. When nobody wakes up one day and just does something, you have to ask why. How did someone arrive at that point? I never once thought about why that girl did what she did. I never thought about the preventative measure of making sure that doesn't happen again in terms of, well, why did she do that? Is there a history of it? How do we help her to make sure she doesn't harm herself or someone else down the line? Because all I did is listen to you and receive it from a parent's perspective, because the first thing I'm thinking is, oh my gosh, something like that happened with Elijah. What would I do? The closest I came to thinking about the other person is you want somebody to answer for that, but you're gonna go put your hands on some kid. But at the same time, your thought is like, I don't care who you are. If you touch my kid, I'm like, do you know what I mean? And we have to think as broadly as we possibly can and ask those questions. So, now I'm entering the ramble zone, but it's true in that anything that I say that anybody finds to be like remotely profound, it's never like, here's what I've figured out and what I've mastered. It's like, here's what I'm figuring out as I go through this thing called life.
Yeah. And by the way, the school, in the storage room that they were in, nobody could get into the storage room. The girl had locked the door, and so there was no way to get into the storage room. By the way, she could have bled out. Jordan could have bled out. Luckily, the girl was shocked into actually trying to help her and trying to stop the bleeding and let somebody in. I realized that it was out of her realm of thinking that she needed help. She needed to open the door and get some help in there. And yeah. And by the way, it's a shock as a parent to hear those kinds of. Then the call I got from the principal at the time was, the ambulance is taking your daughter to school. She's okay, but we haven't found the weapon. We haven't found the weapon.
Wow, my God.
I'm like, wow. What are you talking about? I was in a meeting, and I didn't have my car. I was driven to the meeting in the end of San Fernando Valley, so it was pretty far away for those that know Los Angeles, and having to get there with all these thoughts going through my head, and then to basically be blamed, as Jordan was being blamed for butting into somebody else's personal business. So I am grateful that there are attorneys such as yourself serving our community, because as a parent, first of all, as a parent, if your child's ever assaulted, that's step one, as John saying, like, how do you deal with all of that? But two is, what are your rights and what are the protections that should be in place for our children if they're in a mainstream school? What are the things to look out for? And what's the school district liable for, as a response to some of this? And so, again, we've only given you a chance to really talk a little bit.
I just thought of something, Brian. The one thing we've done, we're so taken with everything about Frank's story and his work that I got to ask him this, which we've never done, which is, okay, so it's the new school year. Right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a new school, first year of high school, first time going to school at all, as a child who is, and tell us if there's two different answers, whether you actually have a diagnosis or if you're going through early intervention because there's a suspicion of a diagnosis. What are some of the things to get ready for the school year in terms of your rights? And to our listening audience, we apologize that this question is coming in 30 minutes in, even though we're calling it a back to school session.
We're calling it back to school.
Yeah.
So if you have a suspicion that your child has a special need, basically that they're not performing at grade level or they're not socially at the same stages as their peers, get an assessment. You have to do in writing, go to them and say, I want a special needs assessment. Technically, it's called a psychoeducational assessment. That's the first one they do. But you don't have to use those words. Just say you want a special needs assessment. And within 15 days, they're supposed to provide you with a document that you authorize the assessment, and then they start that. And I believe they have 60 days in order to create that assessment and have an IEP meeting. And then you discuss what the results of that assessment are. And as far as what's available once you've been assessed as needing special needs, basically they have to provide the placement and accommodations for your child to make progress. Progress is a very vague word, but ultimately they need to do better this year than they did last year. And keeping track of that is difficult. Quite often, the best way is if you get an assessment every 3 years, and you can look back and look at the prior assessment and look at the current assessment and see how their scores have gone up. Everything from their reading levels to their math abilities to their social, emotional needs. So it's a difficult thing to do. We're dealing with experts. The people in the school district, they are experts in their field, and they'll give you a document that's difficult for us lay people to understand. But overall, you can tell if your child's doing better than they were or regressing.
Great.
Unfortunately, during COVID, a lot of kids regressed, and they have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. And the one thing that everybody has to remember, we always talk about this when it comes to the IEP, especially when you're having your first one. You mentioned professionals, people here, doctors, attorneys, whatever have you. They hear a title next to a name and they might forget the title that they have. The fact that they're a parent, that's their child. So when the expert puts a document in front of you at the end of this meeting, where visually it can be adversarial because you're sitting at a table on this side with your child and they're at a table in front of you all in a row. The first thing is to remember that they are there for you. It's not as adversarial. Don't get sucked into the optics. They are there for you. They are there to do, you're not above them, but neither are they above you. And they're there to do the bidding for your child, so to speak. Just because they put a document in front of you at the end of it doesn't mean that you need to sign it. And then when it comes to the IEP and the rights and everything, several things to remember. The only stupid question is the one that you don't ask. And then number two, much less like we talk about estate planning and we talk about wills and trusts, those things can be as specific as you want, and they should be. So too should an IEP be as well. In other words, what do you really want your child's day to look like? In personal development, we talk about mapping out the perfect life by writing your, having a vision, writing it down, whether you have a vision board, affirmations, whatever have you. What kind of affirmations or vision do you have for the life that you want your child to have? Financial planning and everything deals with after you're gone or when they grow up. But with the school day, the school year, what do you want that to look like? Get that in writing, because sometimes people are, we're just so busy thinking of, I got to make sure my child gets through the day. You're not even thinking about what you want their day to look like.
No, absolutely. It should be the IEP document should be as specific as we can make it. For instance, a lot of times the kids go in small groups and they work on, say, math, and they call it RSP. And the RSP can be a push in where a person comes in and works with that small group, or they push out where they go to like the library or somewhere and they work on their subject matter. And the different children are different in the ways they can learn. You could have a child that doesn't want to be different than all the other kids, and the fact that he has to leave the classroom, that really bugs him. And or you have a child that's very distracted when he's in the classroom, and he does really good in a small group in like the library. And so as a parent, your child, and you want the best scenario, and so get that written in there. Like how's this good happen as a group? And a lot of kids have problems with their articulation. They can't pronounce things right, and the schools quite often put the kids in a group speech and language session, and you can't learn articulation that way. You learn it on an individual basis. So you have to specify you want the individual services. And if they don't agree with you, that's fine, but make sure it's in the notes about that you brought it up and they didn't agree with that. And then when somebody like me looks at it, I know to focus on that and work on the best thing for the kid.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's you're seeing a lot of.
Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, so I mentioned Elijah's in his last year of school. And I think it might be strong to say that there's regret, but sometimes I think back to if you had it to do all over again, what might you do differently? And I think I should ask my wife this, because we haven't really talked a lot about it, but I'm curious as to what her thought is as to what we might do differently. Because, like Albert Einstein said, a problem can't be solved at the same level of consciousness at which it occurs. And so when you're in the middle of the storm and in the eye, it's hard to kind of look right around. You need to be able to step out and take an objective look. And as we look back, I just wonder, and some of it is because I know more now than I did when he was diagnosed. We both do. But I always, wonder like what might be done differently. And so the one thing I would say to anybody within the sound of my voice is to give yourself some grace too, because as it is, when a diagnosis comes, generally speaking, and maybe even more so with men, we're like, what did I do wrong? Could I have done this? Is it my genealogy? Is it this? Is it that? You take a lot on. So the same thing takes place as you're going through these fights with whether it's treatment, therapy, whatever the case might be, whether you're talking about, generally speaking, with life skills or education. And so, allow yourself to, give yourself some grace. I guess that's what I'm saying. And, maybe I'm not talking to anybody but myself.
No, I hear it a lot. A lot of the parents are saying, "Oh, I wish I would have known, me before, because I could answer some questions, and they may have fought for more things." And I usually tell them, just look at the future. I mean, it's good, you found me, or you fought for your things, and you did a good job fighting for things. But now let's just look at the future. If I was talking to you, I'd be going, well, is your child going to graduate or not? Should they be graduating? Is that the best thing for them? For typical children, yeah, graduation, a diploma is it. But for special needs kids, sometimes a certificate of completion is the best thing. They stay in school longer. Most special needs kids develop socially slower. And so staying in school for an extra few years can really help them.
Sure.
And then the other thing would be community college. They have a lot of great programs. A lot of, even the four-year schools have good programs for the special needs kids. A lot of them will let the child show up in the summer and live in the dorms with no kids on campus, and they get to be there and start learning everything slowly, and then when the schools all the classmates come on campus, they're better equipped to take on the school year.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
You went someplace I wasn't even thinking of, which is great in terms of the difference between the certificate and the diploma. And you've got my wheels turning because we're going through the next steps as well. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
By the way, when I went to UCLA, I went to summer school between graduating high school and the fall, and it was the best thing I felt when I got onto campus. When the fall quarter started, I was like a veteran. So I think that being in that environment, I think is great. What I was going to ask you, Frank, is that is mental health post-pandemic seems to be a very big thing. And is this another area that your practice, you focus on getting, again, certain accommodations and support for kids who are dealing with mental health issues?
Oh, definitely. A lot of kids thrived with the virtual learning because they didn't need the socialization. And then a lot of kids became, I forgot the name of it, where you just want to stay inside. You don't want to go out. You're afraid to go out.
Agoraphobic.
Agoraphobic?
That's it. Thank you. And so for those kids, I've got the parents saying, I can't get him to go to school. He's just deathly afraid. He's got his anxiety. And so with that type of situation, the school has an obligation to help the parent off-site, to bring counselors over to the house and help that child make it into the classroom setting. Of course, you're not going to do it by force. You're going to get them to cooperate. And then we can work things out where we fade the child in. So he'll do, one class a day for a little while, and then, gradually bump it up, and 2, 3, and sooner or later the whole school day. But everybody, figures things out and learns things differently. And so especially special needs kids. And so the school district has to work with everybody and get them back into to go into the classroom.
Let me ask you this, Frank. In the state of California, especially in Southern California, there are more services and rights and benefits than most have in other parts of the country when it comes to special needs, not just special education. And we always say that a lot of the rights that you have, they're there for you. You just have to ask, but you can't ask if you don't know, right? For instance, when Elijah was still wearing pull-ups, the regional center would pay for those things to be brought to the home, and we didn't have to pay for those. But I'm not sure how we find out. That's my wife is the research queen. She'll find those things out. If someone is getting ready for school, or they have all these things that they're available to them, like some of the stuff you mentioned, those items, I didn't even know that those were rights. Where might someone be able to find a list of the rights that they have or that they are entitled to? Is there in fact one resource or one site, or where might you suggest somebody start to look?
Well, the best thing I've seen is that to join a group, like a special needs group. They have a lot. They have some for dads. They have some for the family, and just reach out to that group, and to probably somebody that's experienced the same things you have, and that can help you out with those resources. The regional center is supposed to be there for you to help you with much of that. And I would like to touch upon talking about the services. They're not equal at all, depending on where you live. If you live out in Antelope Valley per se, or even further out towards Barstow or in that area, they just don't have the services. They're just not available. The special needs departments in the school district would say, yeah, you can have say a vision assessment, but there's nobody out here to do it. Go all the way back down to Bakersfield or so. And
so for those that are listening outside of California, these are more rural areas that Frank is referring to. And
it's hard for me to say it to the parent, but I come out and just say, you got to move for the benefit of your child. And it's, it's like, who am I to say that? It's like, I don't know what their situation is. I don't know why they're there, if it's financial, if it's because of their job, and it must be tough on them. That's all I can say. It's like they know that they don't have the same resources, and it's just a fact of life. It's if you're living in a rural area, you don't have the same things available to you.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. That's interesting. Before, as we're kind of winding down, that was a phenomenal point. Thank you for doing that. Are there other things like that I don't want to miss the opportunity? Are there other things that you think that folks who are listening should know that are similar to that, other issues that they should be aware of?
One is if your child is non-communicative, non-verbal, definitely push the school to get different assessments. One's called an AAC assessment. It's augmentative communication assessment. And it's basically a way for your child to communicate. If it's not going to be by words, then maybe it's flashcards. Maybe it's with an iPad. Get that child to communicate, because if you can't communicate, then all the kids have behaviors, and because they're just so frustrated, they just want to be heard, and the behavior is the only way they can feel that they're being heard. And so if you're having that problem, definitely push the school to try to get that child to be able to communicate. I think it's the most important.
Beautiful. And by the way, even those that, have what we call neurotypical children sometimes still have issues communicating their needs or communicating, a deficiency or lack of or something. We hear so many instances of folks who are diagnosed with dyslexia as an adult, and they go back, oh my gosh, if I'd only been diagnosed when I was going through school and had the help and the support, it would have changed my entire, educational experience.
And I've heard just amazing things when it comes to vision. Sometimes just putting a cellophane sheet with a different color on it helps that child slow down and be able to read the whole page without scrambled words, and it makes a hell of a difference. Wow. It's like a magic bullet, and it just takes the right assessment and the right person knowing what to do. So
that's beautiful. That's fantastic. Shawn, any last questions before we ask the question?
No, I just sort of having this revelation with a lot of things around me lately, listening to another podcast recently talking about how much two things, how much, our true selves, I always talk about, we're as close to perfect as we're ever going to be, unfortunately, when we're born. The younger we are, the before the world gets to us, we're our true self. And when you think about it, let me back up. I developed a new level of empathy for those that actually have a diagnosis, and starting with my son, because if you think about, for someone that doesn't have a diagnosis of any kind and is quote unquote neurotypical, there's going to be a line of demarcation in that person's life at a certain age. Not everyone's age is the same, where they start to become less of their true selves and who their environment says they should be, whether it's your parents that, put a religion upon you, or whatever have you. That's without a diagnosis. When you're younger, and even the diagnosis is there and the changes are there, you're probably, forced or guided towards being even less of your truer self. And the appreciation that I've had this past week is that, man, when when you're expressing yourself and you have a need, especially if you can't verbalize it or whatever, some of our kids are better at being their true selves than we may be. Filters gone, and they're just so like, here's what I need, and I don't know. It's just an observation. I can't believe I answered. Go ahead.
I'm just going to tell you this. So Susanna Peace Lavelle, who we've had on as a friend of our show, we've had as a guest several times. She's an advocate and she's a coach for special needs families. She's written a book, and in her book, she writes a lot about being the mother of a child with autism. And she asked her daughter Arizona to basically write her forward. And one of the things that Arizona said, she's now 17 and has autism, is that everybody should be true to their true self. And in fact, that has become the title of Susanna's book, which is going to be released sometime before the end of the year, called Your True Self. So to that point, Shawn, I mean, it really is, it's an amazing distinction. So, you've hit on the right thing.
It's a big thing about where I'm at right now is this whole thing about one's really true self. And as aware as I thought, as much of the onion as I thought had been peeled away, I'm amazed at how much more of it needs to continue to be peeled away. Put it this way, everybody's in a closet of some kind. That's it. More people need to come out to their true selves than ever. Yeah. So with that, this is the portion of the show where we will ask the following question with context, which is our ability to change the world or make it a better place is based upon, in some way, great or small, our willingness or ability to change ourselves. So with that said, Frank, if you could just give us one example, just one, of a belief or a thought that you once truly and strongly believed, but no longer believe to be true.
And I wish I could be more spiritual in my answer. I've been thinking about it quite often, and for some reason I just get this thought kept on coming up. So I'm just going to say it. I'm really upset at myself for believing that Trump could be a good president. I thought that him being greedy for America and being a bully would be a good thing. I should have looked more inward and realized I don't believe in that stuff. And so basically,
that's huge. But let me explain why. And this has nothing to do with my political leanings or Brian's political leanings. And Brian, it's interesting. I was even thinking, we don't manufacture anything on the show. We do it live. We do no editing whatsoever. And so what I'm about to say is not to sound contrived, but Brian and I have so much in common. Brian, I was thinking of, especially the episodes that we have where we don't have a guest and it's just us. We should think of things where our views are opposing because we don't have, we just, there's something to get from that, especially learning from it. And ordinarily I would be like, I don't know if we want to go someplace political, but what I think is so valuable about what you said is that him as a topic, it's such a lightning rod in that I think it's because of that, I think it's the greatest example of someone talking about a hill upon which they were willing to die and now don't want to be. And if people are listening and they heard everything that you said coming up to that, you're not someone that doesn't take responsibility. You're not someone that just changes direction because, that's not a cool thing. You're someone that's reflective and looking within. And I just think that that's this value in that. And it goes back to everything we talk about, and that questions are more powerful than statements. We need to be more childlike and less childish. And if anybody's listening and thinks, believing the opposite, we're not talking about a political belief. We're just talking about the ability to ask a question and look within. It's immeasurable in value.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you're on. If you're willing to die on a hill and then just realize, wait, this is not the direction that I expected things to go. Mm-hmm. That's a change, and that requires introspection and thought and empathy and caring for others, because you're willing to change your perspective based on what you've discovered. So that's awesome.
And here's the other thing about that too. There are those who will hear you say that would have never voted for Trump, and as a result will go, oh my gosh, at least one of them came to their senses and blah blah blah. But here's the thing, even that is kind of the wrong approach, because you should always be like, wait a minute, why do they think that way? Not why do they think that way? You know what I mean? So there should be, the question again, much more powerful than the statement. I so deeply appreciate that. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, it's beautiful. As we're wrapping the show, thank you, Frank. That's, by the way, not a perspective that we have had anybody share on this really before. So, and we've had somebody who's running for office, the LA City Council. We've had the mayor of Burbank, California, on our show, and really politics has not been a very big piece of what we do, and yet it is crazy because it's so pervasive in everything that's going on. So it's fascinating. This has been an amazing conversation. I love this. I'm going to put it up on the screen one more time to reach out to Frank Zankich, if zankichlaw.com, if you're so inclined, or you have a question, or you need some help and some support. Also, just to let folks know, next week on the 20th, I'm going to be speaking at the Rare Advocacy Summit for rare genetic disease. Again, special needs folks dealing with financial matters and getting some support. I'll be speaking on a panel. I know in October, Shawn is going to be doing a special needs advocacy summit with a couple of folks, estate planning and real estate and finances. Also want to share with you a couple things. We have a men's support group for dads, caregiving dads, called The Den. I'm going to throw it up on the screen. Oh, no, I just went to the wrong slide. So, Shawn, if you haven't put it in the show notes, there's a form that folks can fill out if you're interested in being participating in an open conversation with other dads. There's again, Shawn, you got all of those. Should put those on in the footnotes. We've got links to all of these things. Also, on the 23rd next week, we are Brave Together. They're having their 5K event, not a race. It's a fundraising event to support moms of caregiving moms of special needs children. So we do a lot. Shawn and I sit on the board of and are active in organizations that support this community. And so, Frank, having met you now and knowing what it is that you do, and sharing the resource with folks as we're going to be doing, just know that we're happy to have met you and had this conversation with you, so people can understand where what kind of support that you can give them. On that note, it's great to have you. I'll just say my last thing, and I'm going to throw to Shawn to thank you once and for all, and to thank everybody for listening and tuning in. But empathy and love. I will say this about you, Frank, is that the one thing that I've been around lawyers for a very, 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 very long time, and it's hard to find an attorney, and it's just nature of the practice, I think, that has the empathy and care and love that you express. And so I'm grateful to you for doing that. And for me, that's a big thing. If you empathy and love is always, be empathetic about somebody else's situation. You don't know what they're going through, so have some empathy. And if you look at the world through the lenses of love, the world is just a better place. So thank you for everything that you do. I'll throw it to Shawn to close us out. I didn't mention Billy Footwear. Shawn, you can mention Billy Footwear.
Yeah, I'll do that. If Billy Footwear's, they're a partner of ours. They make adaptive footwear for those that have disabilities. If you click on the link, which you'll find in the show notes, and then on the screen at the moment as well, if you're actually looking at the episode, you'll get 10% off. They're a fantastic organization. And then, the event that Brian's talking about in October that I'm doing with friends of ours, that registration link on Eventbrite goes live at noon our time, so in about 2 minutes. And it feels wonderfully weird. Brian just mentioned an event that he's doing, one that I'm doing. We usually do everything together in terms of our speaking engagements and things like that. But what's happening is we found ourselves in a situation where we've been forced to conquer and divide. And so what I'm going to say right here now in front of everyone is, Brian, I appreciate you immensely. And I would say to everyone, find someone with who you can lock arms and become a warrior against, wage war against mediocrity and add service to other people. It is such a fulfilling feeling, and knowing that you're doing effort to make a difference, but you've got someone that's got your back and they're doing the same thing, fighting your fight with you, even when you're not physically in the same place. The other thing I want to say is, everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you so much for this platform. We have some great things planned for the future. We're going to have another summit that will take place towards the end of or the beginning of the year. And again, remember, questions are more powerful than statements. Let's be more childlike, less childish. Frank, thank you so much for your time today. And to everyone within the sound of my voice, we love you.
Thank you.
We love you. Thank you, Frank. See you all.
And thanks to